editorial voice. In the following podcast, you'll hear the edited audio from my interview with David Slater during our interview series on Instagram. David Slater is the Artistic Director of Entelechy Arts, and he shares his thoughts on how arts organisations can respond during COVID-19 and make a stand against racism. Enjoy. It's so great to have you with us today. I'm really excited to find out more about Entelechy Arts. So I reckon we should just dive right into it.
Okay.
And maybe first of all, you could just introduce yourself, who you are, what's your role within the organisation.
Okay, so I'm David Slater, and Artistic Director of Entelechy Arts, and we're based in South East London, in Deptford, and work with communities across Deptford and Southwark and much further afield as well.
Amazing. So could you maybe just tell us a little bit more about this organisation, why it was established, what you do at the moment, and those kind of things?
Okay, well, one of the difficulties is it's got such a weird name. It's like Entelechy Arts, and people say, what's that mean? How do you spell it? But Entelechy, I think, is quite a beautiful name because it means it's the art of the possible. It's taking an idea, something that could happen, and actually making it happen. And I think that's one of the main things that the company do. We've worked in South East London. I've worked in South East London, making theatre and arts projects for about 40 years. We have long associations with people who live in communities in Lewisham. And there are probably about 150 of us, and we come together in various groups. We work with isolated older people who happen to have quite profound disabilities, and we make art. We make plays and theatre and dance events and write poetry and perform and just make loads of people making loads of stuff creatively is what we do.
Amazing. That's so great to hear. So I'm kind of interested in, first of all, about you and your story and how you ended up to be Artistic Director of Entelechy Arts. So I hear that you were granted a Winston Churchill Travel Fund to kind of learn from different arts programs, particularly in America. So I wondered if you could just tell me a bit more about what this was like for you and what you learned from this.
Well, the Churchill Travelling Fellowship was just amazing. It was, here you are, we'll support you to go for 2 months to the States and just visit like-minded organisations to learn from groups, organisations working with arts, culture and older people. So I started in Los Angeles and then slowly made my way via San Francisco east and ended up in New York. And just kind of, I think when you're traveling, when you're meeting lots of people, what's partly exciting is that you learn a lot about yourself or the work that you're doing in the eyes of the people that you're talking to. You know, do you see them, you see yourself as they see you, as it were. And lots of brilliant experiences. There was one particular experience I remember was in New York, where people were saying, there's this really amazing choir of older people. It's in Brooklyn, you should go and visit it. And I got lost on the subway and I arrived late, and there was this like whole group of people sitting around a huge table, but they weren't singing, they were gossiping, they were just like chatting. And then suddenly the gossiping started to go into, everyone started breathing exercises, and then sound came out of the breathing exercises, and then everyone just burst into song. And it was such a rich experience, but I guess it taught me the relationship, how art can just be a part of ordinary stuff, like with your friends gossiping, and then you start doing something which is really beautiful and creative and has meaning for you. And I think that's really like what we do a lot of the time in the company. We try and fit in what we do into everything else that people do in their everyday life. But it was such a rich experience. Yeah.
Amazing. That's really interesting to hear. So kind of working on that, obviously you became artistic director of Entelechy. So what do you love about this job? What do you love about your role there?
Well, I think what I like, I just work with a great group of people, and a really curious group of people and courageous group of people. All of our work is really with people, so we're working with people living locally in the communities where we're based, and we're making it up as we go along. If you're working with people, it's like having a conversation. We don't know where this conversation is going to go to. You're literally making it up as you go along. But if you're an arts organisation, if you get funded from different organisations, then there's a responsibility to make sure you deliver work that has impact and meaning and value. So I really enjoy working with teams of people and people living in the communities, collectively making it up as we go along, just kind of getting lost and finding ourselves again, and out of that hopefully comes really exciting performance events, big stuff, small stuff. We do some work, we have artists working one-on-one in people's front rooms. We've worked with South Bank Centre, so we're working in huge cultural spaces, local, just a range, so a lot of different kind of scale in the work we do as well. Yeah, but I think I love getting lost and finding myself again in the company of lots of people who I respect and am challenged by. It's a great.
I love that. I love that. And I'm wondering how COVID-19 has really affected this organization. What challenges have there been, and how have you kind of gone about overcoming these?
I think for everybody, well, right across the world, these are uncertain, challenging, worrying times, and we work with people. We've got relationships with people living in residential care homes and staff teams supporting people in care homes. A lot of work with people who have quite profound and complex disabilities. Many of those people live in supported accommodation, and lots of older people living on their own, isolated. Sadly, quite a few people that we have worked with have died, and so one of the things that we've had to learn is how we can support each other to grieve remotely. Yeah. People can't go to each other's funerals, and so we've found ways of celebrating and remembering people and creating small rituals where everyone can feel that they are part of that process. But most important, because I think the company is a network of people, it's how do we continue to stay in touch? The first thing we did was literally get in touch with everyone we worked with, phone calls, just to see if people have got food and just the basic necessities. And then we're an arts company, we need to make art. So how do we carry on working, albeit in completely new circumstances? How do we carry on working remotely? With the added challenge, because if you happen to work with people in their 70s, 80s and 90s, a lot of them won't be able to do what we're doing. They're not, digital connection isn't a possibility. So with we're using telephones a lot, and telephone conference calling techniques. So before lockdown, once a week, 30 people met to sing with each other. We run a project called Meet Me, and so a group of older people meeting to sing. We found ways of actually breaking up the choir into small clusters and working with artists and volunteers so that people are still singing, albeit in smaller groups of 8 little singing clusters online. So yeah, it's that phrase again. We're making it up as we go along, but we're slowly finding our way. We've got artists designing boxes. We're going to be distributing 250 boxes that collectively are going to be part of a work of art that isolated older people and older people living in care homes will gradually assemble creatively with their imaginations, and it all come together when finally we can meet up again. So there are lots of ideas buzzing away. Yeah.
That's so interesting. I love that. We've just had a question from Iona on the comments, and she says, thank you for sharing about the fascinating work that your organisation does. And she asks, in your experience, do you find that your projects are empowering for the participants? And if so, how?
Um, I think I, I think they are. I think people are able to be recognised and have their
Mm.
stories told. I think fundamentally we're an organisation that works to help the visibility of people. A lot of the people we work with are very marginalised. Their stories, their experiences aren't,
Mm.
aren't told, and I think we work with people so collectively we find ways of creating theatre. Let me give you an example. We have been working on a project called Bed. It's with a lot of the older people that we work with said that we feel we're walking around. This is pre-lockdown. When we're on the buses, when we're walking around, it's like we're not seen. It's like we're invisible. It's people don't hear us. They don't recognise us. They don't understand our stories. So collectively, we made this show called Bed, and it involves an older woman on a bed, seemingly abandoned in a public place. So in a high street or a park, and in her nightclothes. So you might be, we've done it outside the South Bank, for instance. So you might be walking around out along by the River Thames in the centre of London, and suddenly you see an older woman in a bed in her nightclothes, and it kind of trips you up. And then,
Yeah.
if you've got courage, you kind of go up to her and you say, "Are you all right?" And it's a performance piece where people have collected their stories and they're sharing their stories. And so this started with a very small idea that we trialed out in Deptford Market, quite close to the Albany, where we're based. It's an amazing community art space in Deptford, the Albany. We do a lot of collaborative work with them. And we tried innocently, naively. We thought, okay, we'll abandon two or three older performers in beds outside the Albany in the market, not really realizing the impact it would have. And like within the space of about 5 minutes, somebody called the police. And I think the most wonderful thing was that four young women, four 14-year-old girls on their lunch break from their local school came in and they said, "We want to report a crime." But there was this urgency about the experiences of these isolated older people. So I think to go back to the question, I think that's one example of how people are empowered. They are feeling that they are actively getting their stories out to huge audiences, and beginning to change the story, change the way that they're seen and recognised and valued.
Amazing. It's so great to hear about a project like that, to just give a voice to people who might feel, as you say, unheard. And I wonder if we could just continue talking about that, because the organisation is all about promoting marginalised voices. And really, in the last week to 10 days, we've seen global protests to give a voice to the marginalised. So I wonder if you have any kind of practical advice for how we can empower people and combat issues in society like racism.
I think it. Uh, I think certainly if a lot of the people that we work with have historically been marginalised, are invisibility are invisible, and we at one period in our history as a company we did a lot of work with Brazilian artists, and they use this phrase "unhiding," but bringing into visibility. Uh, we work in Lewisham. Lewisham has it's a really thrilling part of London to work in with a huge, diverse population. And I think there's a responsibility. I think what we bring into our rehearsal spaces or our meeting rooms, we have a responsibility to make sure that the groups that we work with in the company reflect the people that you see on the buses, on the streets,
Yeah.
that is of community. And very visible. We worked again with the Albany on a project called Meet Me, which was based on a simple question: what if you were living alone, an older person? What if you went to an arts centre instead of a day centre? And we started this idea about 7 years ago, and it's now a regular 50 weeks a year. People gather in a art centre to be seen, to create huge numbers of diverse voices. But the importance, I think, of what we're doing there is that it actually happens not in one of the meeting rooms, but it happens in the centre of the building, in a huge cafe space, so that people are seen, that the people who are formerly hidden are really recognised, and they've become players again, which I think is one of the critical points of the company. I think arts. The other, there's a phrase that a lot of Brazilian artists use. They use this phrase, imagination at the service of the people.
Okay.
Times like now, we need the question: how can we be together? How can we build and rebuild community together? And I think the role of culture, the role of the imagination, the role of the artist as bearing witness to and amplifying the stories of in change making processes is so centrally important.
Amazing. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about the project that you ran called Ambient Jam.
Okay, well, Ambient Jam is I think it's one of the projects that we're most proud of. Actually, it's a lot of our work is with people who carry various labels and distinctions, and so Ambient Jam is for people who who live with profound and complex disabilities. So people who may have a learning disability and a physical disability, maybe a dual impairment. They may not be able to see or hear. A lot of the people that we worked with in this group, we first met 30 years ago. It's difficult to imagine, but the whole process where society really banished people that didn't fit in. So we started as a company with working with people who'd been in the old asylums all around the M25 around London. These buildings where I guess it was out of sight, out of mind, forgotten. And as a company, we were invited to start work helping people reconnect with community. So Ambient Jam really grew out of working with people who had been, I think, suffered a huge social violence. They had been, to be exiled and then kept in really difficult institutional conditions was just such a massive social crime. So Ambient Jam is a space for people who don't really have, or who don't use conventional ways of communicating. They have very different ways of experiencing the world, and just a space where people can comfortably be together with sound. It's a very multi-sensory experience. The collective who come together of participants and artists, volunteers, create environments, immersive environments using light and texture and sound, percussions. You kind of have to experience it to get it, but I think spaces, safe and comfortable spaces where people can be themselves and create together with new languages, new ways of connecting. It's brilliant.
It sounds, I mean, all of the projects that you've spoken about sound so like instrumental to your area. So it's fascinating to hear about them.
Yeah. I think it's that with something like Ambient Jam, what's happening there is that we recently did some really exciting work with Goldsmiths College art galleries, looking at how people, again, it's going back to that visibility, so how people can feel comfortable in huge public spaces and engage with other parts of their community.
Amazing. So I kind of want to go back to yourself and how you found the past couple of months in lockdown. I wonder if you've been staying motivated, artistically, creatively, and if you have any tips for young people who might be struggling to stay motivated during lockdown.
Okay. Well, yeah. Lockdown has been I've actually been living with my wife and I with our extended family. So I'm living with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So Lego appears a lot in my life, and also the question of why, which actually is quite a useful trigger for artistic um, motivation. Um, uh, in terms of my own, I guess because of the way we work, I don't really think about myself as an artist. I feel I'm an artist when I'm in the company of other people. So the ways and means that we found to connect, to stay in touch with the our participants with telephone link ups or digital postcards or whatever, I think is the way that has constantly fired my imagination. Um, how to find? Uh, I think it's about taking notice. You know, it's just like walking is. I find walking really helpful. Then um, allowing yourself to be taken by surprise. So almost um, going to somewhere and then taking a different route and kind of getting lost. I think that whole process of almost getting lost and having to find yourself, maybe literally as well as metaphorically, is a really useful way. And possibly routine, you know, just that little, just give yourself the exercise of doing one creative new thing each day and finding of that. But yeah, I suppose it's the obvious thing. Take notice. I had a really, it's a couple of years ago. I was just sort of doing something, and then there was a voice on the radio. I think an artist was talking, and he used the phrase. He just said, "Don't be yourself, become yourself." And that's just haunted me because I just think it's that sense of all of the time just leaning in or stepping into the new you, which again is quite an interesting way of thinking about how you move through the world.
Amazing. And we've just had another question. And they ask, could I hear more about your sonic sensory letters to participant? And it sounds truly fantastic and meaningful.
Well, it's just so we've got a really exciting team of artists who are resident in a care home in Southwark, and one of their one of their challenges was how do they stay in touch and how do they say we're still here, we're still thinking of you. And of course, we've all heard the stories of the huge pressures that staff teams, undervalued staff teams, supporting people living in care homes have gone through. So I think so artists just started playing, making it with just little video stories, but also going back to, sadly, or many of the participants that they worked with in this particular care home died, and one of the women who died was a dancer. She was just the most amazing dancer, and so she would be kind of like she loved to dance to ABBA songs. So there's this kind of, you can check it out on our website. I think it's somewhere on our website. But there's just this beautiful memory digital card of these two silver gloves that are just dancing to an ABBA number, and it just captures, a bit like a haiku. It just captures that moment of remembering and celebrating a life, and there are lots of those digital exchanges that are just packed full of meaning and just gifts to, we're still here, you're still there, we want to get as close to you as that act of sharing, that simple act of sharing.
Amazing, thank you for that. I've just got one more question for you today, actually, and that is, how can people find out more about yourself, and also how can people find out more about Entelechy?
Well, check out our website, entelechyarts.org. Follow us at Entelechy Arts, and yeah, join us
Great.
for the conversation.
Amazing. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, David. It's been really interesting to hear about, goodness, all of your projects, so many, and each so interesting. So yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I really hope you enjoyed our chat with David. You can find out more about his organisation at entelechyarts.org, where you can explore all their projects. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe and review the show. And if you're looking for something else to listen to, then head over to our sister podcast, Voice Extra. Voice Extra is managed by our voice contributors and is a weekly podcast where they talk about the latest articles they've written and the art and culture they've been enjoying. Until next time, stay safe, stay creative, and we'll see you over on Voice.